Why, hello and welcome again to my Georgian book club. This week, I made a teeny weeny bit of a mistake. We're doing Shamela. That wasn't the mistake. My mistake was not realizing that Shamela is actually a pamphlet and is about 40 odd pages long. So we are doing Shamela. But that's why I'm coming back so quickly after my last visit here, because it's a really short book and I read it last night. So all good, all good. We'll have a proper length novel next time. But before we start, remember we have our shop, we have books, we have writing services. On our Redbubble shop, we have lots and lots of different kinds of merchandise. If you are not in Australia, our books are available online. That you can find them in a lot of different countries. So check them out. It all helps support this channel and my business. So, Shamela. This book. After the last book we did, I needed something that was nice and easy and fun and Fielding. I love Fielding. I've loved Fielding since I was 18 when I read Tom Jones. So there you go. That says something about me, I think. But Shamela is a parody. And so technically, we should also read Pamela. But I tried reading Pamela a while ago now, but I tried to read Pamela and I could not stand her. In fact, I would definitely come down as an anti-Pamelist. She is such a goody two-shoes that she sickened me appallingly. So I'm not reading Pamela. If you want to read Pamela, go read Pamela. Shamela by Henry Fielding came out about 3 weeks after the second edition of Pamela by Richardson came out. Now, Richardson's Pamela was a huge hit. It is an epistolatory novel, and it tells the story of a Miss Pamela Andrews, who is the maid of an older woman who dies and whose son keeps her in his employ and then starts to make basically he tries to seduce, though that's probably too nice a word, this 15-year-old maid girl. Now Mr. B, as he's known in Pamela, ends up marrying Pamela, and she is called virtue rewarded. So she's rewarded for her virtue, for defending herself against the sexual advances of Mr. B through marriage and social advancement. Because she's a maid. Maids are little better than slaves. Domestic staff are actually little better than slaves. Technically, they're paid. Technically, they have some time off, but their lives are heavily, heavily regulated by the household in which they live. Their ability to form more employment is based on their ability to get a good notice from their household. So if they storm off and quit and say, screw this job, they're not getting another job. So their lives are very, very precarious. So Pamela has to, in the novel, manage to walk this very tight line between not offending her master and getting turned out, and also not falling victim to his aggressive sexual advances. This is within the novel, and something that is seen as praiseworthy in Pamela, that she is a good girl. What Fielding in Shamela, and now Shamela is significant because Shamela is the first of the parodies. What Fielding and the anti-Pamelists say about Pamela is that she's manipulative. She is taking advantage of her position. She is not this virtuous girl, but she is seeing the situation and thinking, how can she possibly use this to her own advantage? Which is precisely what Shamela does. Now, in Fielding's little pamphlet, and these critics are not wrong in what they're saying. And we will get to this in due course. But what Fielding does in Shamela is he's creating a parody of this. So it has the front piece, just like Pamela, but different. It's skewed. It has introductory pieces, and it has letters between two clergymen, one of whom is a Pamelist and one of whom is an anti-Pamelist. Now, Fielding is not sitting there and coming down on one side or the other, actually. What he is doing, because both the Pamelist is so effusive in his praise of this novel, and the anti-Pamelist is so vigorous in his condemnation of the novel, that really Fielding is saying, we have this very black and white thinking between the two factions, this all or nothing. Either this book is entirely a work of virtue and morals and manners, or it is entirely a story about a scheming little baggage who is getting who is getting airs above her station. So Fielding is able to balance both of these and then walk a different sort of line with his little book. This big book also contains Joseph Andrews, which is his more fulsome satire of Pamela, which we will do in due course, but I'm passing out the Fielding because there is some real dreck in between. I hope not, but I'm suspecting there's going to be some real dreck in between. I've read some dreck already. But anyway, we have these letters, and the anti-Pamelist assures his friend, who is a Pamelist, that this Pamela is an absolute scheming little baggage who is called Shamela, who is the daughter of a nobody and a nobody who will probably not wed, and has far too much familiarity with the brothels of London to be considered at all virtuous. But she is young and pretty. So we meet, through her letters, Shamela. Shamela is sending these letters to her mother. There are some other letters interspersed with, but mostly this is a correspondence between Shamela and her mother. Now, Shamela is initially somewhat distressed because her mistress has died, which means I have to find another job. That's not so easy. But now her young master is going to take her and her friend on can keep them on, because her friend, the housekeeper, was thinking, well, if I get dismissed from this job, I'm going to have to go and join the brothel, or keep brothel. I think she's positioning herself as a brothel madam, not a brothel worker. So immediately we are stuck into a world that Richardson does not care for. It is a world where the working people, the working classes, are very much understand their dependence on money, understand their dependence on the good favour of the upper classes. They are very much understanding of appearance. So Shamela is warned by her mother not to get herself into trouble like she did last time. So this woman is, and I say woman because although Pamela is 15, in this period, once you can have a baby, you're pretty much an adult. That's how you are treated, and especially servant girls. Servant girls are game. They're free sex. Why pay for it when you have girls at home? There is that, and unless you are vigorous like Pamela in fending off these advances, you're going to end up unluckily. If you're lucky, you're going to end up down the Moll Flanders route. If you're unlucky, you're going to be turned out of doors pregnant and have to get rid of a baby, which Shamela has done. Shamela has also already, she has already got a sexual history. She has had a baby by Parson Williams, whom she really likes. She fancies the hell out of him. But her mother warns her, don't get yourself into trouble like you did with Parson Williams. Make sure this time, and now her mother and Shamela are both very clear that avoiding the sexual advances of noblemen is not easy, so, or even necessarily desirable. What is important is making sure you get something out of them so that you're not left penniless with a baby to get rid of. Okay, so this is a very pragmatic world, a much more sexually pragmatic world than Richardson's world. In fact, the dedication to this, which is a dedication, again, a satirical dedication, is dedicated to Fanny, and that is the English terminology of Fanny, not the American terminology of Fanny. So it's clear, even with the front piece of the novel, or at the front pages of the novel, exactly how much more sexually awakened this book will be. That these characters know exactly what they are doing. They're not pretending. They are pretending innocence. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how this world works. And that creates a really... It runs more along the Pamelist line, though Pamela is a lot less cunning, strategic, and knowledgeable than Shamela. Shamela does fend off the advances of Mr. Booby. He's no longer called Mr. B, he's called Mr. Booby. He's actually fairly timid in his advances. He's not as sexually experienced as Shamela. Both Shamela and Parson Williams are carrying on an affair. So they're carrying on an affair that they intend to continue well after Shamela has got whatever she can out of Mr. Booby. The attempted rapes that occur in Pamela are both are quite feigned in this one, in that Shamela knows exactly what she's doing, and she's using his attempted sexual assaults as leverage to get more out of him. After the first, I think it's after the second, he offers her £250 a year and to set her up as a mistress, which initially, had he offered that earlier in the book, she would have accepted. But at this point, she's put so much work in. She's like, no, I'm going to be the mistress of the house. He is that easy to get. He'll be that easy to get. I can get him, and I can get him in marriage. And so that is what she sets her mind to for the remainder of the novel, which she succeeds in doing. And Mr. Booby discovers that he may have his pretty wife that he got to experience, and he clearly is very inexperienced, because she gloats about how she's done such a good job of tricking him, and how she worked very well on her wedding night to pretend to be a virgin. She and Parson Williams are continuing their affair, and she is spending his money like it is going out of fashion. He is now she knows how to manipulate him, and she knows how to get what she wants. He is her purse. Now, that's by the end of the novel, the pamphlet, actually, it turns out that Mr. Booby, poor thing, has found his wife and Parson Williams in bed together and has turned her out of doors and is now challenging Parson Williams through the courts. So this is a very, very different book to what Richardson was writing. And it's also a lot more blatant than what the Pamelists were saying. Though the Pamelists were saying she's a scheming little minx, this one is very, very much a proper bawdy villain. She's much more like Moll Flanders. Moll Flanders was enormous fun. I did enjoy that one. But Moll Flanders is... And she's a good character to look at to understand Shamela. She is working class. She is entirely dependent on men and their money. And she's entirely dependent upon her looks and her ability to satisfy men in the bedroom for her security and ability to have a living and have a comfortable living. Now, Shamela is more flagrant in this. Moll Flanders does actually prefer to get her men through marriage, and she does actually prove to be quite faithful while she is married, and generally has gone through so many husbands because they keep dying on her, or I think one leaves, but mostly they keep dying on her. So she really highlights that unpredictability of marriage. But it also means that, and that financial and ability to have financial independence. But it also highlights the fact that marriages are mercantile in this day and age. This is a time where estates marry estates. You have marriages between fortunes because it makes a bigger fortune when you bring two fortunes together. Booby is doing something that is considered very, very much against his duty as a landholder, in that he is marrying below his station and to somebody who is bringing absolutely nothing to the marriage. Nothing, not even status. So this is a worse match than Elizabeth and Darcy in terms of status. At least they were same status, even if not great estates. This is marrying someone who is essentially a beggar. If she loses her job, she's either a prostitute or a beggar. And she knows this, which is why she has no problem essentially prostituting herself for marriage and fortune, which is something that Richardson didn't really want to examine. The fact that he was expecting readers to read the book on the page. In fact, his writing style was called of the moment, which Fielding mocks. Pamela's letters are written in the present tense as though they are happening. Now, it is impossible to say that you could possibly be sitting and writing the letter about how Mr. Booby came into your room and felt you up, or came out of your closet to try to attack you. At the moment, I mean, it's quite ridiculous. So that is something that allows for the critics of Pamela to give this, oh, it's a sham. She's manipulating it, which is something Shamela does. Parson Williams has told her that she should write her letters in the present tense to give them more immediacy. And so she does. So Fielding is understanding that this is a construct, this is a literary construct, and it's a literary construct that Richard is aware of, but is also hoping people don't notice the flaws in this construct. One reason I wanted to look at this is because the Richardson strikes me as a far more naive and less sophisticated in many ways writer and therefore reader than Fielding. Fielding is a satirist. So he is automatically a far more sophisticated reader because he's reading things with an eye to how can I make this, how can I do something funny with this? And that instantly levels him up slightly above where Richardson is. Richardson wrote Pamela as a conduct book. Essentially, it's like, this is the good conduct of a young lady. There is in here the appendix, the preface by the editor, and I may need to put my glasses on for this, but we'll see. So, according to Richardson, this is what his book was intended for. This is how he intended readers to read his book. To divert and entertain you at the same time, to instruct and improve the minds of the youth of both sexes. Now, Fielding would say all your teaching is for your servant girls to be cunning and your boys to go chasing after and debauching every servant girl they meet and maybe end up making cruddy marriages. To inculcate religion and morality in so easy and agreeable a manner as shall render them equally delightful and profitable to the younger class of reader, as well as worthy to the attention of persons of maturer years and understandings. To which Fielding would say, you're making clergy look like hypocrites. If set forth in the most exemplary light, the parental and the filial and the social duties that from low to high life. So to lie to your parents and your employer and everyone else is what Fielding would tell you that is. It is doing. If to paint vice in its proper colours, to make it deservedly odious, and to set virtue in its own admirable light, and to make it lovely. So therefore, Mr. B is supposed to look bad until he proposes marriage. And Pamela is supposed to look good always. A heroine who looks good always is boring as boring as boring. She is like a white piece of cheesecloth. There is no interest in her at all. Shamela is not boring. Virtue, spotless virtue, is dull. You need a couple of stains to tell the story. To draw characters justly and support them equally. Yes. If to raise distress from natural causes and to excite compassion from proper motives. So it's that exciting the emotions. Remember, this is a book before the sentimental novels. So the idea of developing that empathy is actually quite new. That is not something Fielding is actually having a go of, because that's a central thing that makes novels work. Novels don't work without that. If to teach the man of fortune how to use it, the man of passion how to subdue it, and the man of intrigue how gracefully and with honour to himself to reclaim it. Because otherwise you're going to end up like Mr. Booby, aren't you? Or Mr. B, married to some scullery maid. Well, she's not quite a scullery maid, she's a lady's maid, which in the hierarchy of maids is slightly better. Her hands are wrecked by being constantly in God knows what they use for cleaning. But that's, Mr. B is not seen as having done anything wrong in having married Pamela. He's seen as having done something wrong in attempting to seduce Pamela, but not in having married her. Fielding and the critics of Pamela would say, actually, he's done something very wrong in marrying Pamela because he's forgotten his duty to his class. And he's made himself look an idiot. That's what Fielding would say. He's looked an idiot. He's married trailer trash, to put it in a modern terminology. He's married someone who is going to be embarrassing to him for all his life. This is not, and who is embarrassing, who within months of him being married has proven him to be cuckolded and has had to turn her out of doors because she's adulterous. So he's been made a fool of in front of everybody. That's not virtuous. It's not actually a good thing for Mr. B to have done this according to either the anti-Pamelists or according to Fielding. He has a wife who will impoverish him within a year and who is not faithful. Neither of these things are good things from his perspective. If to give practical examples worthy to be followed in the most critical and affecting cases by the modest virgin, the chaste bride, and the obliging wife. Well, we've already seen that Shamela, or Pamela, is deliberately construing herself in a way to appear this, whether she actually is appearance of innocence more important than actual innocence. And seriously, can you expect someone in that position to have actual innocence as it is rendered in Pamela? Not really. She'd get eaten alive. She would end up tossed out of doors, pregnant, with no money. That's what would happen to her if she was actually as innocent as Richardson would have you believe. If to effect all these good ends in so probable, so natural, so lively a manner as to engage the passions of every sensible reader and strongly interest them in the edifying story. So again, he's attempting to instruct his readers. This book, Pamela, was preached from the pulpits as a good and moral book. It was a huge influence, and this is what Richardson was particularly writing for. I will come back to this point. And all without raising a single idea throughout the whole that shall shock the exactest purity, even in those tender instances where the exactest purity would be most apprehensive. So what he is doing is, in his preface, is laying out, here is how I want you to read the book. Apparently, Richardson was very hurt by Shamela. The publication of Shamela and the way that it was read, because he really did write this book with these notions that he had written a pure, exemplary heroine. And this is why I would say that Richardson is a much more naive writer than Fielding, and certainly a much more naive reader than Fielding, because Richardson felt clearly, like a great many, I would say, naive writers, that what is on the page is only what you intended to put on the page. What a more sophisticated reader, and therefore a more sophisticated writer, understands is that what you put on the page is what you bring. What the reader reads is entirely different to what you put on the page, because they are bringing their wealth of experience, knowledge, and reading to that page. So essentially what Richardson discovered is Roland Barthes' Death of the Author, couple of 100 years before that text had been written. Fielding, in writing Shamela, in satirizing Shamela, or satirizing Pamela, shows that book texts are not a stable thing. And this is right at the beginning of the text in the 18th century, where novels are just starting. If Richardson had his way, if the Richardson way of writing a novel was to become the fully accepted form of the novel, then novels would be a static thing, and an ability to discuss, to engage with, to critically examine the novel would not exist, because it would be defined by the parameters of the author. Now, we have plenty of examples today of authors who naively believe that what they put on the page is it, that is all it is. And then they will get upset, or in some cases, in a particular case, spend a lot of time backpedaling on Twitter and their blog, trying to, retrofit people's ideas into their children's books. Or a certain other writer who kept insisting that their book was not allegory, in spite of the fact that everyone insists on reading it as allegory, and a great many of their fans will insist on telling you it's not allegory. And it's like, dude, death of the author. Death of the author is a very liberating concept for the reader. It allows you to read a book in a way that may not be according to the author's intention. And that is what Fielding shows with Shamela, is the death of the author. A text once created is now out there, and you cannot control as the author how it will be interpreted. Now, Shamela is one of the best of the parodies, followed also by Joseph Andrews, both of which are by Fielding, because Fielding was a great writer. There were a great many of really cruddy parodies also done of Pamela. But Fielding was not also an ungenerous writer. He didn't keep Shamela actually in his canon of works. He sort of let it die down. He needed money at the time. He was in a debtor's prison. It got him out. And he was also a supporter of Richardson's Clarissa, which is huge, and I'm not reading. But so it wasn't a personal attack, but it was a way of highlighting, hey, the novel is not what you think it is, Samuel. You might want to rethink your idea that you can dictate how the reader will interpret your novel. And there you go. That is Shamela. Next time I see you, we're going to Germany, and we're doing Goethe's Elective Affinities. I can't say when I will be back next, because we have lots of things on our plates at the moment, but we will be back again in a couple of months, not so quickly this time, with Goethe's Elective Affinities, if you'd like to read that before that video. So anyway, thank you very much for joining us with Shamela, and I wish you a very good day. Goodbye. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.